Hey, everybody. Let's go build a snowman after this. I want to read the beginning, and bear with me for a minute, of a wonderful article that appeared on October 17th in the Washington Post, and it was by Sarah, and it's titled, "I'm part of the sandwich generation, but I feel more stretched than squeezed." It's a great piece. I'd be zipping around home, picking up toys, shoes, tiny baby socks. My father called, his voice small in my cell phone. "It's cancer," he said, describing a polyp, a cancerous growth. My steps dragged to a confused half, and I sat down hard at the edge of my bed, my infant daughter asleep in her bassinet beside me. By week's end, my tiny family drove from Washington, D.C. to my parents' house in Ohio. Mom explained that the tumor, which was the size of a golf ball, would not be cut out until after 6 weeks of chemo and radiation. It remained nestled in her body as I'd once been growing. My daughter was still nursing a small, mewing creature who screamed when held by anyone but me. How we love our mothers. She constantly wanted to be held. My mom needed me, too. I didn't have enough arms for it all. I was like many in this middling time of adulthood, trying to care for both children and ailing parents. I've heard it called the sandwich generation, but the implied squeeze of a sandwich never felt right. I felt pulled by emotion, responsibility, need, more like cotton candy that thins into wisps as it spreads until you are nearly holding air. It goes on and on. It's just beautiful. So thank you. So I guess my question is, you are our chief specimen of this generation, and I just want to give a sense, because I know you thought deeply about this. I mean, you should definitely write a book and keep it just like this. It's easy for me to say that, but what is your day? I mean, tell us how you. Yeah.
So. I should also mention I'm now on my city council too, so that further complicates my schedule. But I'll give you an example actually of a weekend. So my parents live near Youngstown. I live near Cincinnati. So I'm now, since we moved closer but not close, we're doing long distance. And a few months ago, my mom said, the ceiling in our bedroom is acting a little funny. So I thought, okay, Mom, we'll look at it next time we come. And when we got there was just a bow in the plaster in the ceiling. And Mom then mentioned little pieces had been falling under her bed. And I thought, oh my God, their ceiling's going to fall. So my husband looked at it, cut a hole, and realized that it had separated completely from the lath above. So we had just enough time that weekend, because we had to be home at 4 for my 6-year-old daughter's ballet, to rip out the entire ceiling, carry it out in shoe boxes so it was small enough that my dad could carry it out to the curb later, because he's sick too, and put up drywall. That's how this is working right now. It's like we're close enough that when there is a real emergency, we can get there and we can help. But we're far enough away that we're not there every day. So I'm constantly checking my phone, making sure they're okay. Meanwhile, I have a 6 and a 9-year-old who have soccer and ballet and piano, and I'm trying to give them a childhood I didn't have, while also taking care of my parents who weren't financially able to prepare for any of this. And I'm like trying to reach across a state right now.
A state and generations.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that you share in your piece is that you are at the upper tier of being a millennial.
Yeah.
So you're the millennial era, and because millennials live in an era where, in general, their parents are often older when they had them, and they are having kids. You can have young kids and old parents at the same time. Right. And is that yours? I mean, that's...
Yes, yeah, that's our situation. And the reason why I wanted to air all of this was I do feel that we need to look closely at millennials, because not just because we need all of your attention all of the time, but because we're in a unique position where we do have these older parents, and we also waited to have our kids. So we have young kids, but we're strapped with huge amounts of debt. So on top of the emotional stress of having to deal with 2 generations at once, we're also trying to figure out how to support families on our own, let alone support our parents, and then investing whatever we can to help our parents means we're not investing necessarily like we should in our own retirement and our kids' future.
You know, two of the things we've discussed this morning we see as part of the culture, I guess, or the ecosystem of millennials today is that in part because of the financial crisis,
Yes.
they are moving in, staying at home. So you have intergenerational, multi-generational families, multi-generational living, and beyond what used to be the norm, and so that's increasing. You also have more millennials working in the gig economy. I mean, you yourself are a freelancer, and those of us who are older are saying, oh, that's because they were forced to by economic conditions, but some are saying now that gave them the flexibility to manage all this. So which is it? Is it by choice, or was it by being victims of a bad economy?
In my case, because I was at that front end of the millennial generation, we were through college, we had jobs before the economy was destroyed. So in my case, it was my husband had a really hard job, and we had a young son, and we were having a baby, and we lived here, and we just couldn't afford daycare for two. So I ended up freelancing while taking care of a newborn, and then my mom got cancer. So all of these things were happening at once, and I just quit sleeping. More or less, that's how that worked.
So, is there any hope? I mean, is there any? Do you see things out there that could be done that could be helpful to people like you?
I don't know how to make this happen, but from my own experience and talking to friends who are going through the same thing, we've had multiple instances now where I recognize my parents are going to need X, Y, Z help. And I am a writer, I'm good at research. I can find a program usually to support what they'll need. And I come rushing in on one of these wild weekends where we're drywalling or putting up handrails or something. And they say, oh, by the way, I found a program, here it is. And then they say, no, not in my house. And so I'll get the ball rolling, get it set up, and then no. Then 6 weeks, 8 weeks later, they finally accept that they need it, but by then they're at the bottom of the list. So I don't know how you persuade a generation of older folks that they really do need help when someone says they do, but hey, that would be awesome if you can make that happen.
You've also, chatted that being from a Rust Belt state, a Rust Belt area, you grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, has its own particularities that may aggravate some of these conditions.
Yes.
So why is that?
So I grew up outside of Youngstown, which if you know anything about Youngstown, it's poverty. And so growing up, I had nothing, our family had nothing, and that's why they don't have retirement money now, because they had nothing. But my mother's singular goal for me was go to college, get out of here. And for a lot of us, that was what we were supposed to do. So we did, and we left. And so now those regions that, if you're paying attention, are also now Trump country, are kind of abandoned by a generation of us who otherwise would be in those homes taking care of our elderly parents. And instead we're doing it a long distance because it's the only place we can get a stable living, like work in the gig economy in Youngstown. Good luck. But you have to go to a bigger city, which means going far away. And so, like I was telling you in the back, the neighborhood I grew up in, there's my parents' house, 2 houses down the street on the corner of the house is now gone because during the recession it was vacant, raccoons took over, it had to be knocked down, 2 houses up, the house is gone, end of the street, 2 houses are gone. Their neighborhood is literally abandoned, and so their only asset is that house in this neighborhood where no one wants to live. The house next door to them, the bank owns, and they wouldn't auction it off until they got a bid of $18,000, and no one would bid that for a 3-bedroom house. So, and I'm crunching numbers and trying to figure out, like, where are we going to get the money? Eventually, they will need nursing care. Their only asset is this house that's falling down around them in a neighborhood that is obliterated, and it's worth nothing. There is a program.
We were talking about unions. I think one of the things when I was up with two members of Congress is, these are both two generous spirited members of Congress trying to help things, but they're, I guess part of the discussion is why isn't there more of a demand function out there to get flexibility for people to provide support? We were talking about unions, and I found this very interesting that you think maybe the decline in unions has also exacerbated this.
Well, I think more of the decline in unions has led to the change in votes in that region. But again, in that area that for so long it was union country, but it was that because people had jobs. And so then they also had retirement. They had the things that unions make sure you have to be taken care of. But around the time I was born was when the factories went under. And so now there's a broad swath of people who don't have those benefits, because not that the unions on their own went away, the jobs that put you in the union are now gone.
So I get this picture of you being, a really good person, stretched out, driving back and forth, checking out the drywall, have the two kids, the husband with a tough job, and what the audience doesn't know is you're also a city councilwoman for Wyoming, Ohio.
Yeah.
So where does that come in? Yeah.
So, actually, right now we had an ice storm overnight, and I've been getting text messages and phone calls the whole time because we have trees down and power out. So it's just like one more set of people I want to take care of. But I think for me, a part of it was just a local issue that motivated me to run. But also, I feel like there's a sense of powerlessness that a lot of people feel politically or even in this situation. And I felt like if I ran, if I was involved, I could help. Maybe not my own family, but my neighbors. And that's actually been a blessing. I mean, it's a heck of a lot of work, and I have constant meetings. My kids have to go to commission meetings with me. But I also live in a community that's very tight-knit, and I get to see how people are able to lean together. And that gives me hope just on a national scale that still exists. So.
When you think about lessons you've learned, insights that you've found, efficiencies you may have found. I mean, I'm just wondering. I mean, I all the people I've talked to today, and I haven't gotten a really good answer. But I'm wondering, has anybody figured this out in a replicable way? Like, is there a market opportunity for an app that can fix all this? I mean, I know that sounds really shallow, but you just sort of wonder. I embrace my shallowness, but you just wonder that the stress is so palpable. I mean, it's been this way all morning. That I'm wondering, as you've kind of swum through this, are there things that others can replicate that you think are, even small takeaways on how to make this work?
I do not have an answer. I think that's part of why I'm here. I wanted to hear your answers. The biggest help to me has been my habit of calling people and asking questions. And just the number of social workers who have referred me to other social workers who know about a program, and just constantly calling and asking, like, does this exist? How do you cover this? What do you do if there are a lot of falls?
Right.
So maybe there is a way of systematizing that so that it's not 8 days on the phone trying to figure out who you need to talk to, but a way to just look up, here is my concern. Who can help me? What is the program? How do you qualify?
I want to go to all of you in a second, but after you wrote this Washington Post piece, what happened? Did your phone start ringing off the hook?
I got
adding more stress, more.
Lots of emails, lots of Facebook messages. I mean, even just mentioning I would be here today. There were people coming out of the woodwork that I haven't heard from in years, maybe because they're really busy dealing with this, but who are just, they can't get above it. They can't see what the solution is going to be, because one of my friends I grew up with, she's just a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old, and her parents and her in-laws are both sick, and she doesn't know what to do. On Twitter, I mean, came flooding in. So those of you out there with any power to influence this, you will have happy constituents if you figure it out.
Great. Let me go to all of you. Questions, comments in the floor. Yes, right here. Hi.
Hi, Donna Butts from Generations United again. And when you're talking about answers, one of the things I haven't heard this morning is people are talking about the need for adult daycare, child care, that sort of thing. What we advocate is intergenerational use of spaces and places, so intergenerational care facilities. And there's a great example outside of DC, the Easter Seals Intergenerational Center, where people can take their parents and their children. And so it makes it...
Where is it?
It's in Silver Spring.
Oh, interesting.
But they're around the country. But we've also been looking at why there aren't more of them. And we've made it very difficult because of policies and zoning and things like that to really restrict that kind of care. Whereas families talk about how great it is because the children and the grandparents can see each other during the day, but also it's using space to connect generations rather than separate them. It's more cost effective, and I think it's something that we really need to be pushing more of.
No, it sounds cool. Have you guys been advocating for these kinds of centers too?
Yes, we have. We just issued a report on them in June with the Eisner Foundation, and now the next one we're doing is on what the barriers.
I mean, it would match with some of the intergenerational housing things as I was discussing later, and particularly it's becoming, not something people are just stuck with, but in fact are chasing into their new financial instruments around there. But thoughts on those dimensions of finding, I wouldn't call them support, but activity centers, support centers, those sorts of things that provide intergenerational.
Actually, near where we live, there is a nursing facility that also runs a preschool. And among the preschools, it's very, very coveted to get your kid in there, even if you don't have a parent there, but because they get all these adoptive grandparents who love reading the books. But there's no way we could afford for my parents to go there.
Wow.
So it's great, but making it so that there's access is also going to be part of the solution.
Other question, comment? Yes, in the very back.
A few years ago, I was taking my then 95-year-old father to